plus years in the GIS industry for electricity, telecom, water, and gas, with the last 6+ years for Relevance. He has contributed to projects worldwide in GIS asset management and mobility, and is commercial responsibility for Diagnostics, Water Office, Smallworld Enterprise Gateway, and consulting services.
Thank you. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. We're winding down this particular program.
Thank you. I'm very proud of that.
But for this particular session, we're going to wind it up a little bit. Because I think we have a very, very interesting topic to discuss today. So I'm going to talk about diagnostics. Diagnostics is a performance monitoring tool for the Smallworld environment. I'm going to give some examples, introductions, and so forth. So we'll just go through the presentation. First of all, I want to introduce the team. Not all of the team is here. We've got myself. We've got Swami. Swami, unfortunately, is not here today. We've got Kurt in the corner. We've got Koen in the middle. So if you have any questions, technical questions, by all means, don't be afraid to ask. Good. So I want to talk a little bit about diagnostics and introduction, how to monitor big data, and how you can reduce, for example, your Smallworld 5 migration effort. So there's a bunch of hashtags there. If it's good, everyone gets a copy of the slides so that you can start linking where you need to link to. Good. So I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of diagnostics: speed, scale, and relevance. So from a speed perspective, what we want to do is, well, let's take a step back. There's no question that the Smallworld system is the best system of registration available in the world today. And I think everybody recognizes it. But the perspective is that we really want to help improve the user's experience, whether that's performance, whether that's scale, whatever it may be. So what that means is that we need to take a look into how the user is using the system. Are they using it correctly? So you need to have data to be able to support what those aspects are. So if we talk about speed, for example, one of the things that we look at is, well, how does the performance of data store work? Does it have an index? Does it not have an index? Those are some of the things that we can actually gather information about. Can we resolve tracebacks quickly? How often do your customers, your users, come back to you and say, I've got a traceback, or even a warning, and it just becomes irritating and irritating and irritating. So we want to really, really find a quick way to resolve those types of issues. From a scale perspective, you want to have the performance. So the performance is, in this particular case, diagnostics can support over 10,000 users. Now, there's only one Smallworld company or Smallworld customer around the world that's above 10,000 users, and that's Deutsche Telekom in Germany. But that does not take away that the scale of the system should be able to manage as many people as possible and as much big data as possible. And that's what you're going to get with diagnostics. So we also want to take a look at how are your servers or how is your hardware performing, or how is your network performing. So we can take a look at assisting you in terms of the correct load balancing, whether you're in a Citrix environment or just a desktop or a laptop environment, and what are the results of that. So I have a couple of examples here for you. Relevance. So this is not only relevant for your users, but it's also relevant for the managers that are responsible for getting certain levels of quality within your organization. So if we look at a data manager, we'll want specific dashboards on the quality of data, conflicts. You'll have a technical support team that will want to be able to analyze the tracebacks and replay the user clicks in exactly the environment that that user has, because then you will get exactly the same result as what that user got. A release manager, understand what to test, what to discard. A database admin, identify problematic queries, database transactions. We have a dashboard for everyone. And that's the key, because because we have enough granular information to give relevant information in that dashboard. So let's talk a little bit tuning versus monitoring. What you really need to do is, if you're tuning, you know that you can do some magic programming or tonal programming or whatever, try and improve it a little bit. What we're suggesting, what we're saying is you really have to have that data. That data will give you the direction to help you improve your Smallworld user environment. So where to improve magic, where to improve the user interface. So if you know the past, then you can move forward to the future. So there's no insight without measuring. People will tell you it's not working well, it's not doing this, it's not doing that. But to back that up with good quality information is a problem. Diagnostics helps in that. The other thing is that when we acquire the data, it should have absolutely no impact on the user performance. So we're quote unquote being a little bit like Big Brother, and we're seeing all the activity that's taking place, but we're not trying to be Big Brother. What we're really trying to do is understand how the user is using the system and how we can help them improve the use of the system. Okay? So, big data. We acquire every single action activity within the Smallworld environment. So every user click, every data query, everything that happens in the Smallworld, even with GSS, you can see what's going on. So that way we can tell you where the bottlenecks are going to evolve from. So I want to discuss a little bit about the mindset, because the mindset is something that's difficult to overcome. But I always use the following analogy. So we all know about SCADA systems. We use SCADA systems. And we actually use SCADA systems to monitor our network. How is it performing? What is it doing? Similarly, we can use diagnostics to monitor the performance of the Smallworld implementation and how can you improve it. So that's kind of an analogy. So we have to overcome the barrier that it's not something that we need to monitor. It is something we need to monitor, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong if it's not done properly. And I'll give some examples. So analysis, we gather the big data, we learn what's happened, you act on it, and then you monitor to ensure that it doesn't continue down the wrong track. So this is the one thing, I love this picture, because really what happens quite often is we see the trees in front of us, but we don't see the forest. But we really need to know that forest. We need all that information that's in the forest. And that's what we're gathering for you. So a traditional logging within Smallworld is that you write a script and you'll get a little bit of information. With diagnostics, we're much more granular. We have a tremendous amount of information. We can support gigabytes of information that users, when in their activity, and store it in a big data database. So first thing is speed. We want speed. Just like NASCAR, just like Formula One, we got to perform. We got to get better. So what are some of the examples that we can do that? So I love this one. You see that we've got Kuhn and Swami and a couple of our guys on call here. Real thing. We have a memory leak. Found a memory leak in Smallworld 5. And it's not that we're trying to make Smallworld bad. No, we see it. And because we see the memory leak, we can actually tell the user in advance with an alert, please shut down, close it off, start up again, so that you don't lose the 4 or 6 hours work that you've done all day. That's what this is about. The nice thing is, of course, is that when we find this memory leak, we let Smallworld know, GE know, and GE will actually address the issue. Okay, so it's beneficial. It's a win-win-win all the way across. So, example, Videotron, 332 users at this moment, and they had 44, something like that, users that were actually coming across a memory leak. So we were able to alert their users in advance, please shut down so that you don't lose all your work, start up again, and they're starting fresh. Okay? Indexes. And I'm just going to talk along on the left right now, but this is an interesting one because all the blue bubbles, so the size of the blue bubble refers to how often that data store is queried or accessed in any fashion. And the color blue has an index, orange does not. So we can see when indexes have not been set onto a data store. And of course, when indexes are not put onto a data store, that reduces the performance level within your Smallworld environment. So we see that, you can put an index, and then afterwards you can measure the performance improvement by having that index placed. Yes?
Does it tell you when there's a query that could be beneficial to have an index for and there's no index? Is that how it, or does it tell you just there's no index on this object at all?
So what we do, that's probably more a technical question, but I'll just kind of briefly, from my perspective, what we do is we measure the performance, and then we can see the ones that are slow, and then we can take a look at whether there's an index or not. Am I correct, Koen?
Yeah, so it will show you the query is slow as well. So you know which fields to add the index to.
Good. So this is a wonderful little bubble chart that we use. We use it in different areas within our dashboards. Performance UI. So sometimes you'll have a user interface, and sometimes it'll be quick, and sometimes it'll be slow. And we'll want to know, well, why is it slow? And you can actually measure that, so you can see every single user click or tab or icon or whatever you select, and you can see how it responds. And in some cases it will respond quick, and in some cases it will respond slow. But if it's responding slow, we want to know why it's responding slow. So we measure it, and we can see exactly every single menu tab item in the Smallworld system that you've got installed, and you can see where the UIs can be slow. Tracebacks. So how often is it that the user comes to you and says, well, I did this and this and this and got into this problem. But really, they just said 4 of the 20 items that they really did. And you don't get the full story from the user. That's always the case. And it's not that they're trying to hide something, it's just that that is the norm. So we're accustomed to that. So what we do is we can replay every single user click to get to that traceback, so that you can see exactly where that problem lies. So of course, once you see where the problem lies, then you can go fix it, and then you can measure it afterwards as well. You can see that those tracebacks will go away. Warnings, similar thing. Scale. So this is an architecture. I'm not a technical guy, just giving a little bit of the architecture. But what we have is we have an archiver. An archiver basically sits with every user. It sits with the server. You see everything that's going on. So we acquire that information about the activity in the Smallworld environment. Then it goes to a collector. And what the collector does is basically feed the data into the big data database on the other side. And how does it do that without affecting user performances? We see when there's a lull time, when there's a time of no activity. And when there is no activity, then collector gets on the ball and starts sending all that data into the big data. So the user never experiences performance issues with diagnostics. Then we put it in Splunk, and Splunk is the big data store that we're using. And out of the Splunk environment, we can do all the dashboards and charts, analysis, and things like that, so that you can see the results that you need to see. And if I remember correctly, yes. So we get to the next slide. Diagnostics is available as a on-premise solution or an in-the-cloud solution. Now, I know that there are some utilities that are not going to be allowed to get that data into the cloud, so we understand that. That's why the on-premise solution. But if you are in a cloud environment, one of the things that we do is a complete managed services offering around it. That means that we can do the checking, we can do the analysis, we can do alerting for you. When you get into certain problems, we can make you aware of that much quicker. But it's a managed services type environment. So, mention a little bit about the hardware, or using the hardware. This is a result from a water company in the Netherlands. And they were using Citrix, they were using desktop, and they were using laptop. And then what they were finding was that application startup time were different. And so we wanted to bring that in perspective for them, and bringing that in perspective to them allowed them to say, well, ooh, the laptop, that's slow. So why is it slow? And Citrix was quicker, so why are we not taking advantage of Citrix? So those are the questions that you can start asking internally as to how to help improve your particular Smallworld environment. Relevance. So we really have an extensive, comprehensive tool that allows us to get information, to allow you to look at database transactions, queries, report generation, custom functions. I'll get a little bit to the custom functions later. Data validation, data conflicts, server load balancing, web service balancing. Okay, so you get a lot of granular information about how that system is being used. So a data manager will want to take a look at data conflicts. How many merge and post conflicts are there? How many checkpoints do you have? How many alternatives do you have? All of that can be measured. And if they're, I know one customer that has 90,000 checkpoints. Do we really need to be at 90,000 checkpoints? Those are the things that we need to ask and figure out how are we going to manage the system properly. From a data administrator perspective, the database transaction, so we have a module that looks at short-term transactions and how are short-term transactions being used. How do we analyze them? What's the result? Another thing is, and I have to admit, I really, really like this one. Where's PK's in the back there? PK can tell you the story a little bit more. So one of our customers is TNB in Malaysia. And what's really interesting is they were trying to find out the performance of their users. And one user had actually come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, turned on Smallworld, and at 5 o'clock had turned it off. Had done nothing the whole day. So I know that doesn't happen so much here in our normal environment, but it's interesting to see that you want to identify how your users are performing. And it's not always going to be apples to apples, it's apples to oranges, because you'll have different size work orders, different types of projects and things like that. But somebody that comes in at 8 o'clock and then turns it on, walks away for 9 hours, and turns it off at 5, it's a little bit questionable. So those are the things that do come in perspective for a user. Diagnosing a business process. So this is a simple business process. You have a design manager, you do QA/QC, you have task-driven, the job manager, and then you go into the web services. So we had done a business process check with Cox Communications. And the reason we had done that was because Cox had come to us and said, we're getting data corruption. We don't know where it's going. What's happening? We don't know how it's occurring. And what the ultimate result was is that it was the usage of the system by the users in the wrong order, the wrong business process. And by using the process, or by using the functions in an improper process, was causing corrupt data, which meant that Cox couldn't service their customers in a proper fashion quick enough. And they were just saying, I've got corrupt data, I don't even know what I can do. Okay? So remember, I've always said that Smallworld is really the best system of registration that you can get. But we have to make sure that our users are using the system as we expect them to use the system. And if it's not in the correct fashion, does that mean that we have to change the training for our users? Do we have to take a look at how our training program is set up so that they don't get into a data corruption type of environment? So that's one of the things that we were able to successfully find for Cox, and they no longer have data corruption issues, at least in this business process. Let me put that on. Good. So we can monitor the change after we've improved the magic code or the index or whatever we've done to improve it. And I think that that's really important because that actually identifies the business case. So I'll use the example for Videotron. They found a memory leak. It was in 5.1.6. It was sent to GE. GE fixed it, and then they implemented 5.1.9, and they found another memory leak. So, we have to continue to monitor how things are working within the Smallworld environment because we want to make sure that that user experience is good, and we want to make sure that the company has good quality data all the time so that they don't get into trouble and don't lose a lot of work. So, migrate to Smallworld 5. I love this story. I'm going to, right down to the bottom there, we had a Dutch customer that had developed a bespoke gas application. So we're not using GDO. And they wanted to migrate from 4 to Smallworld 5. And what they really wanted to understand was what was the use of the system? Were they using every single component that was in the system, and did they really need to migrate it? And ultimately the fact is that 33% of the functionality that they had developed in the past did not get migrated to Smallworld 5. 33% from a migration perspective, that saves an awful lot of money from the migration perspective. That's point number one. Point number two, the footprint of the application is dramatically less, meaning you'll get better performance because it's not loading everything all at one shot. You're reducing what actually gets loaded. So they were really, really happy with the results on the gas side, and they're currently doing it on the electric application as well right now. But when you say 33%, that's good. And then we can measure it after. That's a really wonderful thing. We can measure what the usage is. And when customers do come back, or when the user does come back and says, well, this function isn't there anymore. Yeah, but it wasn't being used. Now you're using it. And those are the things that are going to come up, but that's good. I mean, you want to know what's being used in the footprint. So if you're looking at it from, for example, an electric office perspective, electric office is an application. You get it from GE, you get the full footprint, you can, you'll migrate everything. But as you and I all know, there are a lot of customizations on top of EO. And they are different for different customers, for different reasons. We understand that. But that can still help you bring into perspective what you do migrate and what you don't migrate. Good. So we've got a roadmap. So although we do a lot of things, we still want to do a lot more. And as an example, we're working together with GE right now, looking at broken block headers. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever been confronted with a broken block header, but if you have a broken block header, you are dead. At that point in time, you are dead. You've got nothing. You have got to go back, and you better hope you've got backups in place, because if you don't, you're in trouble, okay? So what we're trying to do is We're working together with GE, looking at those files, determining whether we can do something with diagnostics to help resolve a broken block header issues. And there are some other things we're working together with GE on that to take the next steps with diagnostics. That said, there's a lot of things that we still want to put into the product. You can talk with Gerrit and Koen. They have a lot of ideas, and we just put out a release Friday. 2.1 of diagnostics is now available. It's got a much easier user interface, and with that user interface, if you click and you click and you click and you click, it's drill down, drill down, drill down, drill down. It's a lot more easier to use today than it was previously. Good. So, in conclusion, we address speed. We want to improve the overall performance of the system. Okay. One of the things I forgot on speed, and I just want to give you this example, is there was a customer in the Netherlands that has an integration with SAP. So they would do the work in Smallworld, and then they would send a request to SAP, and it would wait, and it would wait, and it would wait, and it would wait. And 6 weeks later, there might be a response. So we see one of the things that does happen is, where does the fault or the blame actually get put in certain situations? Sometimes it gets put into the Smallworld environment. Sometimes it gets put into the SAP environment. But at least when you measure within the Smallworld, you can say, this is the actual situation. I sent a message from Smallworld to SAP, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. So bring that into perspective within your organization, because then they can see that maybe the business process doesn't work in SAP. Maybe there is just too much volume of work. Those are the things that will really help you improve the whole process within your organization. Scale, we get all of the data. We're very granular, we get a tremendous amount of information, and then what we can do is we can analyze it. Scale also means not a number of users or amount of big data. We're not limited in that fact. So you will have all that information. You can maintain that information for a year, for 2 years if you wish. Just depends what your system is and how you want to move forward with it. So I want to thank you. I've got Diagnostics in Control. I did want to briefly identify the portal, and I'm going to escape out of here. So here is the Diagnostics in Control website, and on the bottom left you see a portal, and if we go to the portal, at the bottom, you'll see videos and webinars that we've done in the past. Where you have the diagnostics sheet in front of you. We're conducting a webinar in 2 weeks, and the content of that webinar will be based on the questions that you actually asked me today, or Koen or Gerrit. So you're more than welcome to have input in terms of what you want to see. And the custom modules are modules that these are actually modules that other customers have created in diagnostics and have made available to other diagnostics customers to look at quality manager, merge conflicts, job manager, super file monitor, short transaction. They are all available, so you can incorporate them. We take a look at the code. They agreed to share it with the whole diagnostics community, and it just kind of snowballs from there. It gets larger and larger and larger. So we don't limit it. We're definitely not trying to We just want to help improve the Smallworld environment and the performance and the user experience. And this is our way of contributing to it. Good, thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
So we do have more server-side performance issues, especially with like small transaction server, not necessarily from the end user side. So I'm just wondering if you guys, because I see short transaction server here, but how about the electric office side also? Do you guys offer some kind of monitoring? Because one of our challenges is that we don't have logging, like server logs. I'm not sure how to find like electric office server logs that we could send to Splunk, because we use Splunk.
Oh, okay,
And
great.
our monitoring tool team have always asked for those logs, and it's difficult to figure out where they are.
So it's a little bit more technical. I'm going to let Koen, he's right in front of you there, answer that question.
Thank you. Yes, so basically it's very simple. Everything that's in Magic, you get diagnostic information for.
Okay.
So if your application servers are running the Magic for electric office, they will give you insights and diagnostics. It's as simple as that.
So at Smallworld 5, we've introduced a logging framework, and that is working off the core platform. So we've proven it out, and we've got some example reporting and logs information that you can look at. The GIS adapter as well comes with a complete logging framework, and this is a really good augmentation, if you like, of that core logging framework and plugging this in on top.
So, 434.
The
Doesn't have
login is not,
Yeah.
that's really.
Another reason to go 5.
So, and one of the things I should probably mention is that Diagnostics runs from 4.1 through to 5.2. Okay. Mark, you had a question?
Well, basically it was with Java 5. Now that, Smallworld 5 on Java, with more stuff kind of going into the Java realm, are you going to be able to tap into, like if I have a jar file that's totally Java, but Magic's calling it, and I want to diagnose that jar file, are you guys going to be able to have some hooks and handles for that kind of thing?
So we're going to the technical side again. Koen, you're up to bat.
You might be able to hear me as well as the microphone.
Yeah, so the way it works is we track a lot of things inside Magic by default. There's 25 different types of things, like the user clicks, database transactions, queries, all these kind of things are tracked by default. If you're adding customization through Magic or through Java, what you need to do is just define the entry point, which is a Java method, or a Magic method, I mean, and then that will be tracked as well. So if it's custom extensions,
Will you be able to do that with, let's say, on the Java side, have a entry and exit point on the Java side? So if I'm creating Java code that's specifically for Smallworld, I can track that as well. So can you add that functionality in the future?
yeah, so it will track it when it leaves Magic into the Java bar.
Right.
That's where the interface is. That's where we will do the tracking then.
Right, but I'm asking, would you be able to add it into the Java realm so I could call that trigger in my Java code that I would develop or something like that? So Diagnostics can pay attention to that as well. I mean, it's something to think about. I mean,
Yeah.
because things seem to be wanting to be moved into Java, so,
So it's based on the Magic code at the
Right.
moment, but if we have a use case for that, we simply extend it towards that point.
I have a question. We're in the process of implementing CT20. our internal audit's always asking us from a Smallworld perspective, who's doing what on the system. So it's your, I mean, when you're tracking this, for every transaction that's being done, it actually logs a user ID also?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so you could use that as an audit tool then?
Correct.
And then extension to that, that's why you're running it in a magic session. Does it extend out to the Emacs command prompt? So if I'm executing commands at the Emacs command prompt, did that also get incorporated into the logging?
Not by default, but you can easily add them. So we did that for a customer, for example. They just wanted to know whatever has been entered after the session was started normally, right? They wanted to know all of the magic commands, and we simply added them to the log. So yeah, that can be done as well. And everything that we collect is always tied to the Smallworld session. And then the Smallworld session gets a unique ID, and the unique ID refers to the user and the IP address and the Citrix server where the session is running. So all this context is available for the analysis.
Okay, which then leads into, does that ability, what I was just describing, is that in Smallworld 5? I mean, as far as logging goes, who's doing what from the EMAC prompt all the way down into the application?
I don't know that it's at the Emacs level.
Because from a system admin perspective, they want, I mean, just like when you have a Linux system or whatever, they want a log of who's doing what, not just from a user perspective, but especially from an admin perspective where somebody has the, the power to, in the old days, remove star.
Yeah.
We don't want that. So, not necessarily a preventative, but at least some accountability.
Yeah, you have an audit trail.
Right.
So the logging framework, we've tied into the GIS adapter in certain parts of the application to log certain types of activity, but not to the extent that you're describing, Linda, I think at this point.
We use audit history today, for our end users.
Right.
On
As
certain
an object,
objects.
yeah.
But internal audit was like, well, that's nice, but
That's not what we're looking for.
we want to know what everybody's doing on
Yeah.
every object.
That's something we can take back to our core product team and discuss.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say in diagnostics, because we see all the activity within Smallworld, all the actions that are taking place, you get it. Well, you saw that, for example, the traceback, replay every click. We're that granular in terms of information and what can be provided in the audit report.
Yeah. Before diagnostics, what we had done was, I think Emacs itself has a logging thing. The way you start Emacs, I think there is a parameter, and all activity that is happening within Emacs gets written to a file, and then that gets post-processed later on to extract the information. So all that gets stored somewhere. So this is something we have historically done in the past. But then diagnostics is, I think, the next step into.
And I can show. I think if you've got that information in a log coming from Emacs, and it's in the same kind of format that the logging framework can then load in, then you can use the tools, Kibana or whatever, to actually understand what's happening and report to the dashboard against it.
Good. Any other questions?
Nope.
Yes, Scott. Sorry.
So is this an all off and all on, or can you target a specific magic session? And that's part one of the question. Part two is it meant to stay running in an audit type framework, or are you really just capturing everything for a day or for 4 hours and then using, big data to kind of analyze that?
So by default, it runs on all of the sessions, and if you want to exclude some of them, you're perfectly able to do that. There are settings available to do it. We just usually recommend against excluding any session, because up front you don't know what the information is that you're going to need at a later point. So, for example, like John says, if you want to go back and retrace the user steps, you're not expecting a problem up front. So you need to have all of the information, and then afterwards go back and see what happened. And for example, for the migration case, if you want to say this bit of the application has been used and this bit has not been used, you need to track all of the users to be able to do that. So you can be selective, but usually customers just say, give us everything.
And you can tag what the environment it was from. So if you're concerned about, if I'm testing, you kind of don't want to pay attention to that as much as in production. So you can tag your session and filter the outcome or the output.
But for the example of, like I've got one job scheduler on the back end that is just taking a really long time, and I almost want to profile it and its set of tasks, you can filter it down to a specific machine.
You can. In the end, it's just a piece of software that you start, right? So you can activate it manually or not. So if you want one session only, you can do that.
And it's meant to run for days or for a small snapshot, or like what's the space impact for, you know, how much data you're gathering? It's very granular, right?
It is, yeah. So for a data entry user, the heavy ones, we generate about 10 megabytes per user per day. For the light users that only do just viewing, it will be about 5 megabytes per user per day. The server sessions will generate a bit more.
And if you capture tracebacks, it captures a lot more. Because we started capturing tracebacks, and the Oracle DBA was like, why is the Oracle database getting so big? And so we had to do a little bit of tweaking with, getting rid of the data as soon as it got into Splunk or something. So there's some settings to capture true tracebacks, and those actually add even more.
So typical recommendation would be for, let's say, 200 users a day?
All the time.
2 days? All the time?
All the time.
And so it's rolling.
It just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. It goes into the Splunk big data database, and we just store it and store it and store it and store it.
Yes. So the thing is, you just say, I want to allocate 1 terabyte of disk space for the diagnostics data, and it will just fill it up. And when it's full, it will replace the old events by new ones. So you don't have to care about that if it's, and it doesn't affect the price as well.
Okay, and I think there was one more question,
Yes.
and then we're
At Puget Energy, we have a number of job servers running all the time. But we see situations where we have those job servers lose connection to the database, and we suspect that it's caused by infrastructure problems. I was just wondering, how can diagnostics help diagnose what was the cause of those problems?
So I'm gonna.
Like from external causes rather than actual application.
So the way it will help is by giving you complete information about why it happens, when it happens, on which servers, and that will help you to correlate the root cause eventually. So it will not go all the way down to the network level and say there's a packet missing. But what it will do is it will sit in the magic session and say, okay, connection has been lost, and then because you have the information from all of the job server sessions, you can see what happens to all of them at the same time, or it always happens 8 o'clock Monday morning, or always happens during your backups, for example. So because you have it for all sessions in one place, you can do all these correlations.
Okay, so I think we've reached the end of our time slot. Thank you very much, John. It was really interesting, and I think we've got quite a lot of feedback and nodding heads on that.
Good.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.